We would never do that to you. Wink. It must be the Spanish's fault. You need to get involved to protect your investments. Now, let me say this. Pretty clever. Very sharp. What do you think Spain thinks about this? This is bad. We need to end the rebellion before the Americans get involved. We need to do what we should do. There's a way in dealing with guerrillas, in that you may not necessarily like it, but it's the way you fight against guerrillas. There is a simple way. But in order to do it, you're going to need someone who is pretty tough and pretty much uncaring. The Spanish king is going to send someone to Cuba, a long-time military man. He sends General Wheeler to Cuba because he thinks he has the characteristics necessary to deal with guerrillas. General Wheeler has been in the Spanish army for a long time, and he does have an unfortunate moniker. General Wheeler is called the Butcher. He has a long history of violence and simply just almost psychopathic behavior. But he's the one the king needs. He sends him to Cuba and tells him, General Wheeler, you can do whatever is necessary to end the rebellion. It has to stop, and it has to stop fast. Because if the Americans get involved in this, Spain has a lot of problems. We need to crush the rebellion. General Wheeler knows what to do. It's textbook. He does what he's supposed to do. But there's always a problem fighting against guerrillas. You never know who the enemy is. They simply melt back into the population. You need to separate the guerrillas from the civilians. But if you don't know who they are, it's awfully difficult. When Wheeler arrives in Cuba, he makes it very clear what he wants to do. He tells the Cuban people, look, I have zero problems with Cuban civilians. You are loyal members of the Spanish Empire. It's not the civilians I'm at war with. It's the guerrillas. So I need every law-abiding civilian to identify yourself. I need you to show up at multiple locations throughout the island, declare that you're a loyal Spanish citizen, tell me that you're just a civilian, and I promise no harm will come to you. It's the guerrillas I'm at war with. If you don't report, if you don't identify yourself, the only thing I can do is just assume that you are a guerrilla. If you're not a civilian, you're a combatant. Show up at multiple places throughout the island, and I promise we will take care of you. In actuality, what Wheeler wants to do is simply isolate all these civilians. He takes over 300,000 Cuban civilians when they show up to report as civilians and simply throws them into holding camps. He tells them, as soon as I defeat the guerrillas, I will just simply release you, send you back to your farms, no harm, no foul. I think I can defeat these guerrillas fairly quickly. His timetable is way, way off. Wheeler has some problems with logistics. He has over 300,000 civilians in these holding camps, and he has enough food and water for them for probably about 3 weeks. The guerrillas hold out much longer than just 3 weeks. We're going to see within a month, the food runs out, the clean water runs out, disease starts to run rampant. We have a situation where we have tens of thousands of people dying in these holding camps. Now, I do want to show you something here, as I want to show you an example of someone that does actually survive one of these internment camps, one of these holding camps. He survives, and he is one of a few people that's going to be able to get out. Now, I do want to show you this, but it is going to be a little bit disturbing. This is someone who almost starved to death, but he does survive the internment camps. Now, with something like this going on, we have on our hands a humanitarian problem. We have 300,000 plus people being held and 10,000 people starving to death. Word gets to the United States, and it's going to be printed in the newspapers. We have a humanitarian issue that's now being publicized as to what's taking place. We have these Cubans in need of American help. To make matters a little bit more interesting, there is a newspaper that's just barely hanging on. It's almost bankrupt. This particular story seems to resonate with readers. People are going to start to read through these stories in a newspaper called the New York World. The New York World is printing what's going on in Cuba, and their newspapers are flying off the shelves. This could keep them afloat, but they need more readers. So if you need more readers, you need better stories. They take these stories and start to sensationalize them. They exaggerate them. They start to make these stories into something you say, oh, that's so outrageous, it can't possibly be true. What do we call that today? Clickbait, fake news. Yeah. All they're doing is simply taking a story and making it bigger. But there is something else about this. In a strange twist of fate, the owner of the New York World is an editor that's had some successes and some failures in his professional career. A guy by the name of Joseph Pulitzer. Now I should ask, have you heard this before? There's a prize named after him for journalism. This is the guy saying, we need readers. Take those stories and build them up even more. The bigger the story gets, the more people are buying it. His newspaper saved. But he does have another issue. Pulitzer has an investment that's not going very well. He's put money into Cuban sugar farms. What's happening to the Cuban sugar farms? They're being destroyed. He needs American involvement in a war. He starts writing all these stories and getting them bigger and bigger and bigger in hopes of pushing us to war. He starts saying things like, I have personally seen General Wheeler poisoning drinking water, taking Cuban babies in his hands above the cliffs of Cuba and throwing them down to the hungry sharks below. People start saying, is this actually happening? And Pulitzer basically says, sure, it's not happening. We need to get involved. Now, I need to probably ask this. Is he pretty clever? He saves his business. It's going to work out well for him, as an award is named after him. But things are getting bigger and bigger. More and more newspapers are starting to copy what he does. It even gets its own name. These exaggerated, sensationalized stories get the name of yellow journalism. Now, real fast, I will tell you this. When I was in high school, I learned about yellow journalism, and someone asked, why was it called yellow journalism? And my teacher said, it's because the paper it was printed on was yellow. Went to college, learned about yellow journalism, and someone asked, why is it called yellow journalism? And my professor said, it's because the ink that they used at the time came out yellow, but then darkened to black. All right, okay, trust. Went to graduate school. Had another professor say, oh, it's because there was a comic strip in his papers called The Yellow Shirt Kid. That's why it's yellow journalism. So why is it called yellow journalism? Just pick whichever one. Doesn't matter to me. I do have good news for everyone.